Hey guys, Lytane here, and it's time to look at an unlikely sequel that took a lot of years to come out. So let's see if Utawarerumono Mask of Deception is worth it. Utawarerumono Mask of Deception was made by Haku and released in 2015 in Japan, with an English release in 2017. I talked about this in the video on Prelude to the Fallen, but Mask of Deception was the first game in the series to be localized in English. Some people that worked on the first game are present here, but the majority of the team were all new faces. I think it's this reason why the first and second games have little connection between them. New team, new game. That being said, there are a lot of recurring ideas and motifs that make its way into this game. You play as a mysterious man with no memory of his past. He wakes up in a tent in the middle of a snowy mountain and is found by a woman named Kuon. She's an adventurer and explorer that loves seeing new sights, and she nurses him back to health. Does this sort of sound familiar? As he doesn't know who he is, Kuon gives him the name Haku, similar to a person from her hometown. Haku is quick-witted but incredibly lazy, more wanting to drink than manual labor. Kuon feels responsible for him and vows to help him get on his way and find a job or something to that effect. Along the way, they fight bandits and monsters, make a few new friends, and of course they get tangled up in a plot that's much grander than themselves. That's pretty standard. And hey, haven't I seen those masks before? Mask of Deception is 3 parts visual novel and 1 part strategy role-playing game. Most of the time you will be listening to and experiencing the story that is on offer here. A quarter of the time you'll get into one of the many fights in the story, and these play very similar to Prelude but with a lot more features. You now have multiple attack chains that you can choose from, and each have different effects than just a single one. Each attack in that chain can also have different sub-effects, and it's important to learn which ones do what. Like Haku has a chain that avoids counters but is generally weaker, so you should probably use it if somebody's going to counter you. The combat system is a huge upgrade over the first game. You have many options which you have to consider when you make your moves and attacks. This gives the game a lot more depth and makes each character feel a lot more unique. These aren't all the changes though, they also revamped the zeal mechanic. As you do attacks, you will accumulate zeal, and some actions require zeal to use. These are generally more powerful attacks or heals. But if you ever reach 100 points, you become over-zealed. You get a bonus to your stats, and at a high enough level, you can do a finishing move. But the best part is that you get an extra turn when you first hit this state, so you can and will use this to your advantage. But as you fight enemies, you'll notice that they too have a zeal meter, and guess what happens when they hit 100? They too get bonus stats and an extra turn. The zeal system adds another layer of complexity to the game that was missing in the first. Now you have to think about your attacks and how the enemy will react, so you don't trigger their overzeal action and just get wiped out. They also up the difficulty of the fights overall, so I never felt overpowered like I did in Prelude. There is also a hard mode if you want an extra bit of challenge. All of these little touches really helped expand the battle system and make it feel complete. I had a lot of fun in these fights, and as I never felt overpowered, I didn't get bored. Hell, in some of the late game fights, I even lost a few times. With all of that said, I do find the battles to still be a little clunky. Checking all your avenues for each attack is still slow, and you have to watch the same animations a million times. While you can set the game to auto, you won't, because you want to hit those criticals for the extra zeal and damage, so expect to memorize every one of your attacks. But that is only one part, a small part really, of the main game. The reason why you're here is the story, right? Personally, I was a little torn with it. On one hand, pacing is so much better, where the whole thing feels like it's moving forward. In saying that, a good majority of the game is still slice of life, but I went into this game expecting that, so I wasn't disappointed. It's in these sections that we get to learn so much about the characters and their life, like hanging out when they're cooking or seeing them go to the pub. These are fun, and each character gets a lot of them in order to flesh out their background and personalities, so when the main, more serious plot comes in, it feels a little out of place here. This is almost completely opposite from the first game, which had the main plot front and center, where the slice of life parts felt a little bit odd. While I wasn't a fan of Haku and his personality at the start, it did grow on me by the middle of the game, pretty much like every character in the game. He may be lazy, but he is fiercely loyal. The other new characters do start out a little shallow in terms of personality, like Lytane being the shy, awkward girl, and Atuy being the hopeless romantic that loves fighting. These archetypes help establish the characters, but a lot of them don't grow all that much over the course of the game. A lot of the characters' backstories are also left a little vague, and I know that's because they're expanded upon in the next game, but it's strange with how much time we get to spend with them. They give you enough to know who they are, so it's not a bad thing in any way. I just thought there would be more. Due to the nature of this being a more character-focused story, I wasn't sure what the overall plot was going to be. Sure, I was enjoying the characters, but I had no idea where any of this was going. You are given hints and story all throughout the game, so nothing really blindsides you, until about the last quarter or so when the plot becomes more focused, where all the twists and turns pop up. Without spoiling anything, the game does end on a cliffhanger. They know that they wanted to make another game in the series, Mask of Truth, so they don't resolve everything here. This annoyed me as it felt like the story was just finally starting to pick up when it abruptly ends. But it is a good ending, and thankfully I didn't have to wait for the next game to see how it concludes, or else I might have been a little bit more annoyed. To go with the story is the art. It's a huge step up over the first game. There are so many locations and backdrops to see, each with lots of detail and a variety among them. Also, a lot of the side characters get portraits here, yay! In the first game, only the main characters and bosses got this treatment, with very few other characters getting a portrait, so this really helped flesh out the world on display. And flesh is the right word to use because the smut returns. Yeah, lots of the attractive female characters get shown off for you, and I can't show any of that due to YouTube. And for some reason, whenever my wife would look at me playing the game, I would have to explain what was going on in these scenes, and I swear she only ever looked up when it was that part, not when it was the main story of them cooking or something. It was only the smut. The thing is though that the main story is very interesting, and I don't think it really needed the smut. It's just there to lure a certain demographic. To tie all of this together is the music, which is just as good as the first game, with many great quality tracks. Sawaya returns to lend her voice to some of the tracks. She even wrote the opening and closing songs. She helps tie the whole series together in my opinion. She's sort of like Utada for Kingdom Hearts. So now we'll get into a few spoilers in this section, so skip to this time if you just want to see my final verdict. Let's start with how the game handles the old cast. Well, I should say how they don't handle them. We aren't treated to many scenes with the first game's cast, and even within the ones that we do get, they aren't very fleshed out. I wanted to know what had happened to these characters in the 20 or so years between games. I think it's set up like this to give the new cast more time to develop and become important. Then maybe in the third game we'll have these two worlds combine. Now that's fine on paper, but it's still a little bit frustrating to see. Some characters like Tuka and Karalau have mysterious origins and act a little sinister in this game. They seem to know more than what they say, and it's not explored. It's just dropped by the end of the game, and I'm not sure why. My personal theory is that due to the largely new team, they wanted to tell their own story without being constricted by the first game. They even changed some of the personalities of the old characters in order to fit with their new narrative. And that's fine, I guess there was a 20-year gap, but why have them at all if that is the attitude? Next up are some of the twists. I loved that Haku and Mito were humans. Well, mostly human. They are genetically altered to help live in this post-apocalyptic world, which apparently was enough to spare him from the Tatari curse. It also leaves it open to have more people that escape the curse, and maybe we'll find them in future games. I also laughed at how Mito couldn't remember Haku's real name because it's been 200 years. It's silly but fun. Then we have more information on cloning, all this new super technology, and even the masks. These were designed after finding the Iceman for humans to wear so they could try and live on the surface. It's mentioned in the first game but heavily expanded upon here. These masks give their wearer untold strength and abilities at the cost of consuming that person's soul and life. Go too far with them and you'll die. I liked how unique and different they all were, and how the invasion in the middle of the game was just there to show off their powers to us. As for the ending, man, that cliffhanger was crazy. Seeing Osthor fighting Vurai and how strong they both were, damn, that was cool. But I was confused by Serana and Ururu though, because they are pretty much made to stop these crazy mask wielders. They're a countermeasure by Mito put in place so not one person could destroy the world, or something to that effect. Maybe it's because they aren't at full strength, but Vurai takes a huge beating before they try and seal him, so he's not at full strength either. Yet their one thing, the whole reason for living, fails. It's just odd and it's not fully explored, and I felt like it didn't have any rhyme or reason to it. But it does lead to that big epic final fight scene, so I'm not entirely mad. In my opinion, Utawarerumono Mask of Deception is worth it. For the well-told story, the very likable characters, and a fairly involved combat system. While the game is more slice of life, which leads to a slower start to the game, it does help flesh out the characters, which you will come to care for. The main plot is full of nuance and intrigue, culminating in a fantastic ending, but a frustrating cliffhanger. When not in the story, each fight has plot relevance and depth. With many characters, skills, and enemies, you'll need to think on your feet about every one of your actions. The best part is that even though this is the second game in the series, you don't really need to have played the first to understand what's going on. So if you really wanted to, you can jump in here. Alright, with how crazy this game ended, let's see if Mask of Truth can finish off the story in a satisfying way. So guys, tell me what you thought about Mask of Deception. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Was this your entry into the series? Technically it was mine because I bought this game first before I found out about the whole series, but I'm curious if you played this one first and if you could follow along without having played the first. And don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, all that stupid stuff down below, and I'll see you as Utawarerumono month continues next time. Bye!